waiting for Anna. There they are. Oh, okay. Yes. I don't know how to do that. Okay. I thought. Just waiting for Anna. Oh, where's that? I think there was a bit of misunderstanding as to when the session would start, 7 or 6:30. So we just want to make sure that people who thought it was 7 are here. So we're just giving them a minute or so to get here. There you go. Matthew, do you want to come down here? Yeah. Okay. Well, it's 6:36, so I guess we can get started. Oh, my notes just closed in, so I need to open that up. Sorry. Okay. Hi, folks. My name is Michelle Petrusevic and Anna Hostefi. Wave, Anna. We are your Parent Talk Committee, and today we are bringing you the first Parent Talk of the year. The purpose of Parent Talks is to, I also said VCPA is sponsoring this. So the purpose of Parent Talks is to educate parents about important subjects that would help us raise our sons. And the first talk of the year is about university preparation. So we have in-house experts, Mr. Achille and Mr. Taggart, and they will talk about the university application process. And we also have a guest speaker, and Mr. Achille will speak to that. Just in the interest of time, we do want to finish at 8. And we will have a little bit of space for questions. If you have specific questions, please email Mr. Chili and Mr. Taggart separately, just so that we can wrap it up and be done, and because it makes it a long day for our teachers here, and Theo in the back, who is running AV. So what I would like to do is just to start out with a prayer and a land acknowledgement, and we have 2 student volunteers, Matthew from grade 11 and Sasha. Sasha, come over here. So what's the protocol? We start with the land acknowledgement and then the prayer, or else forget? Okay, sounds good. Why don't we start with a prayer, because Matthew is taller and he's here.
In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, amen. Glorious and blessed God, we place our works and ourselves into your hands. Anoint our creativity, our ideas, our energy, so that even the smallest task may bring you honor. God, when we are challenged, guide us. When we are weary, energize us. May the work that we do and the way that we do it bring hope, life, and courage to all with whom we minister within our school community. Bless our teachers and administration with wisdom and discernment, our fellow students and their families with courage, strength, and compassion. Rooted in your love, may your face illuminate all activities done in your name. Amen. Blessed Evan Rice, pray for us. Live Jesus in our hearts forever. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit.
Sasha?
We would like to acknowledge the traditional territory of the Musqueam Nation and extend our appreciation for this opportunity to live, learn, and play on this beautiful territory. Acknowledging this territory shows recognition of and respect for the Indigenous people who live and have lived on this territory. Recognition and respect are essential elements of establishing healthy reciprocal relationships. These reconciliations are key to these relationships are key to reconciliation, a process to which Vancouver College is committed.
Thank you. I will pass the phone, the mic to Mr. Achille. And sorry, the boys will stay at the door till 7 to make sure that they're letting the stragglers in. Okay, great, thanks.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to say just quickly welcome to all of you that are made the trek here in person, as well as our audience online. We're being broadcast and also recorded for a future audience. My name is Greg Achille. Big fellow over here to my right is Brian Taggart. We are the academic and post-secondary counselors, primarily working with senior school students. It's just a couple quick things. Appreciative of the guys that began, especially Matthew, with the prayer. Sometimes it's easy to lose our way in all of the many options, the minutia, the noise, just everything. Crystallize it down to this one thing. God has already determined, right, a purpose and a reason for the life of your son and my son and his son and all sons, all our students. Our basic purpose is to provide enough experience, knowledge, information to help your son to realize what that is, right? And then in pursuing that and fulfilling that, in that he will find happiness, purpose into the future. That's really our overall goal. A lot of that happens to run through the university system, which is kind of the more direct reason that we're here. The second point I want to make, just before I turn it over, tonight is more about generating questions than answers, and that's not a bad thing. The questions have to come first. It's not likely that all of your questions are going to be answered tonight. You may realize you have some questions tonight that you didn't realize you even had prior to tonight. So that's the beginning of a long process. And ultimately, it's a very individualized process. So the presentation is quite general, right? What your son actually ends up doing is very specific and personalized to him, his needs, his wants for the future, and so on. This evening, basically 3 parts, if it all goes well, and we can get it all in by 8 p.m. The first part, which is the major part, will be Mr. Taggart presenting. He's created a presentation, versions of which we have used with grade 12 students. That'll be the majority. After that, we'll have a brief question period. As we transition to the third part, which will be a second and shorter presentation by a graduate of ours, Mr. Sean Martinez, who just walked in at the back. Now, Sean's presentation will be specifically geared towards post-secondary admission into programs regarding fine arts, design, architecture. So during the question and answer period, kind of that break, if you don't think that you have much interest in that part, then at that time it would be fine for you to leave. But if you want to hear about very specific and useful information about those areas, design, fine arts, architecture, that will be Sean's. That's Sean right over here on my left, former student of mine. Yeah, I know, calculate. How old is he? Still standing. Barely. What did I teach you, math? Oh, okay, good. I won't ask what year. Anyway, without any further delay, let's get on with this thing. I'm very pleased to introduce my colleague in advising, Mr. Brian Taggart. Brian.
Hey, thanks everybody. Normally, I'm going to try to be very, very efficient with this. Usually this presentation goes, for my part, even almost up to an hour and a half. So I'm going to try to be pretty efficient with it, give you some idea. And like Mr. Achille said, hopefully this maybe brings up more questions. What I would advise you the most after tonight is really talk to your son about that. If they have questions about these things, to actually come to our office, stick their head in and say, hey, Mr. Taggart, Mr. Chili, I have a question. 9 times out of 10, I'm going to say, hey, sit down. Let's talk about it real quick. And usually it's a fast conversation. But that starting point of getting comfortable with coming in, sticking their head in our office and saying, hey, I have a question about this, getting that answered is really a great starting point. All right. So I always have this up first. So the reason I put this up is the majority of our students do go to Canada. I know we have a lot of questions every single year about the U.S. To be perfectly honest, we get maybe 10 to 20 guys apply to the U.S. every year, and we usually have maybe 5 to 6 on a high point actually go. And there's lots of reasons around that, mostly cost. Okay, mostly scholarships aren't as good as what people think they are. And so a lot of the high-end schools where a lot of the kids really apply to are really hard to get in. Okay, they're really hard to get in. So I make the map really big for Canada because that's where most of our students go. And for me, the schools in Canada are fantastic. If people look at world rankings, you know, Toronto's in the top 20, UBC's in the top 40, and there's many of the schools in Canada that are in the top 50, 60 in the world. It's a great country with great education system. Now, I do have England and the US up there as well because we send, you know, some students to those places as well. But the main reason I have the map up first is this. It's my long pause for emphasis. Is to speak to you first and foremost. To really have conversations and make sure you listen to your son. The most anxious kids I have coming to my office every single year are the ones that don't want to go to specific schools, but parents want them to go there because that's what's best for you. So it's really interesting this year, and I'm not talking one. I've already had a half dozen conversations with young men in grade 12 who have zero interest in leaving the province. Zero. But somewhere along the line, they think that going to University of Michigan or University of Toronto or Western or Queen's or McGill, well, they're good schools. That's where you should go. It'll make your future better. And the boys are in my office going, I don't want to go there. But they won't tell their parents that. And the reason they won't tell their parents that is because they don't want to disappoint. That kind of breaks my heart a little bit. Actually breaks my heart a lot. Good lesson for me as a dad. I try. I still make a lot of mistakes too. But I put this map up there for, like I said, for a reason. I think it's a great starting point, is when you start having those conversations with your son. And a lot of times in grade 9, 10, 11, they're great starting point conversations. But does a young man really in grade 10 know if they really want to go to the University of Toronto? It might sound great. It might sound amazing. But all of a sudden when you're in your February or March of your grade 12 year and you're like, wow, okay, this is for real. This is for real. But I'm not really sure I want to go there. But I don't know how to tell my parents I don't want to go. So I really encourage you to have those conversations with your son. Start them soon and really talk about what it means to go away. What does it mean to go away to school? Because what I say to a lot of students is, that may be a great school that you want to go to. But is there anything around that school that you are interested in, your hobbies? Like I had a young man this year who loves skiing, loves it, goes all the time, had memberships to Whistler, Cypress growing up, loves it, okay? And he was thinking about the big encouragement to go to Toronto. There's no skiing around Toronto, no good skiing around Toronto. Right? And I just felt terrible. He goes, I want to keep skiing. Oh, but my parents said that the biz program at the University of Toronto is one of the best in Canada. They're right. It is one of the best in Canada. Not a great place for his hobby. So I always talk about the boys all the time, but you know what? Find somewhere you want to go. When you're not in class, are you going to enjoy going to school there? Because I find a happy student, a person or a student that's enjoying the things outside the university is usually happy within the classroom as well. And I think those are just as important. For me, like I said, I have those conversations with the boys all the time. So I'd encourage you, that's why I start with the map, okay? Have those conversations of not just what you want to study, but where do you want to live? Where do you want to spend your 4 years? What will make you happy outside of the classroom? I think that's incredibly important. Okay. So I think when you are starting to look at university preparation, the best way to start looking at university preparation is working backwards. In other words, a lot of students will come to me and say, I don't know what to take in high school. What do I take in high school? And that's where I start talking about, what do you think you want to study? And then they'll tell me, well, I think I may want to study this, or I want to keep my doors open for this and for this. And I say, okay, well, let's work backwards. Let's work backwards and let's start at the university. Right? So a lot of times it's looking at the admission requirements for university, and that'll help you with your course planning for high school. Start there. Now, the same thing a lot of students will be, the same thing as you, is, well, how do I find requirements at the university level? that can be a challenge. A lot of it starts with just getting onto the computer and actually Googling UBC admission requirements. And it'll start bringing you to the right place. So I'm going to take you through a little bit of a run through of admission requirements. You don't have to remember this. If you can remember Googling admission requirements, that's the main place to start. When we start looking at admission requirements, I think this is incredibly important to know as well. Every university is its own business. There's no oversight of the universities in Canada. So it's like a hamburger joint. You know, there's lots of different places you can get a hamburger, but they all make it a little bit different. Okay, the university is very similar. Okay, if you want to get into a university for a science degree, a lot of them are very, very similar. Some are a little bit different. Kinesiology, you know, all kind of similar, but some have a few different requirements. And so when I'm going through the university requirements tonight and showing you how to look at them and see what how that'll help you for high school, for picking courses, I'm also going to point out some of the subtleties that are different. Because I'm going to tell you one of the main ones, as soon as we get into it, it's a little bit different. There's this course in grade 12 here that a lot of the students take. It's called Calculus 12. And there's always the question every year of, well, I don't think I want to take calculus because it'll bring my average down and I might not get into the school. But I say to the student all the time, but you wait, you want to go into a program where in your first year, you have to do calculus. And calculus already has in university a high failure rate in first year. How many of you ever took calculus in here? I bet how many of you never want to see calculus ever again? Right. Okay. So like I always say to parents, more parents sometimes to students, is it about getting in or is it about staying in? Well, to be honest, both are true. I think both are true. So let's kind of get into it. Okay, so I just Googled UBC admission requirements. And when I Googled it, it took me to this page. Now, I know it's a little bit hard to see, but and like I said, I don't have a lot of time tonight, so I'm going to go through it fairly quickly. But this takes me to this page right here. And this just from Googling UBC admission requirements. And you can see I'm in the Vancouver campus, and it goes through a bunch of other requirements that you can see. But I'm going to go down and look at the degree. And under here, I'm going to go to, right away, let's go to Commerce, UBC, Sauder School of Business. And it's going to come up here, and it's going to give me the requirements. Well, the first thing you'll see is under grade 12 is that you have to have English 12 and Pre-Calc 12. What you don't see there is calculus. You don't need calculus to get into biz school. Well, how is that so with a top 40 school in the world? Well, UBC can make their own rules. But here's the crazy thing about it that you have to pay attention, which I think is incredibly important. When I go into the courses that you take in your first year at Sauder, and I go down here, you'll see right down at the bottom, one of the courses you have to take in your first year of Sauder is Math 100, which is differential calculus. And if you've never taken Pre-Calc 12, that's going to be a struggle. That's going to be a real struggle. So once again, you don't need it to get in, but you may need it to survive. And so once again, knowing this information, you can now work backwards into your high school selections and make choices which you think is best for your son. What do you think will be the best situation? But here, let me go a little bit quicker here. This is the University of Toronto admission requirements. And I'm going to click on this just to show you what the page looks like. Once again, University of Toronto admission requirements. And sometimes you got to navigate some of these websites. Because down here you can go into and they'll start looking at Canadian high schools and some definitions of what it looks like to be, you know, if you're going to look at BC, what it looks like. Like they do some translations of courses of what they look like. You know, in BC, you know, it's called Pre-Calculus 12. In Ontario, it's called Advanced Functions. You know, in BC, it's called Calculus 12. In Ontario, it's called Calculus and Vectors. And that's all fun and dandy. But I think the important part to know is to say your son, we just looked at Sauder, wants to look at the Rotman School of Business. So I'm going to go down the Rotmans right here. And under Rotmans, it's in Ontario language, okay, but I'll translate for you. It's in Ontario language, but right here you could see that for Rotmans, you need not pre-calc, you need calculus. Okay, so what am I talking about here about working backwards and doing your research? UBC does not require calculus for entrance. Rotmans does. Same kind of programs, different requirements. Slightly different requirements. Okay? So those are the beginning of just showing some of those things. If I go back in here to UBC again, and now I want to be able to go into sciences, UBC. Once again, you'll see some requirements up there for grade 12. Great way to work backwards, right? If you got to take a NABI, physiology, chemistry, or physics, now you know how to work backwards of what to take in grade 11. Okay, you can just work backwards. What you notice up there again, like I said, is no calculus. But you can see in grade 11, you must take chemistry and physics. There's no bio there. There's no life sciences there, right? So sometimes some kids in grade 11 will say, Mom, I don't want to do physics. Physics is too hard for me. But I want to do sciences, so I'm going to do chemistry and life sciences. Well, if you do chemistry and life sciences, you're not going into sciences because the prerequisites are chemistry and physics. So once again, it's an example of finding it and working backwards. So you know exactly what to take. Once again, as an example from university to university, you can see here again for UBC though, there's no calculus requirement up there for sciences, right? But if you go into the Faculty of Sciences at UBC, and I scroll down for first year courses, and I will interpret for you again or translate, Math 101, okay, is calculus in first year sciences at UBC. So if you've never done calculus, you could be in trouble, okay? Biology at University of Toronto. Here's their program. Once again, you need calculus. UBC, okay, UBC does not require calculus for admissions into sciences. So a lot of times you have to do your research. There's some people that will say, well, if you look at UBC, it'll cover most of what you need for Canada, and it's just simply not true. So you just have to do your research, and if you do your research, you'll be fine. But I promise for a lot of you, that question will come up in grade 12. Oh, Mom and Dad, calculus is really hard. It's really hard. Can I drop it? And if you ask the question, well, do you need it for admission to UBC? The fast answer is no. The next question is, do you need it to survive at UBC? That one is yes. Okay? Or you just do it multiple times at UBC. Which is also true. Which is also true. And completely normal. Okay? Let me get rid of that. Okay, back on here as well is I have University of Waterloo. Okay, I'm going to go back into UBC, and I'm going to jump in. I'm just going to show you a couple more. I'm going to jump into, any engineers in here? Oh, a few of you. All right, there we go. Okay, now I'm jumping into engineering here. You can see, once again, you engineers must got to be shocked about this. Okay, engineering. Okay, there's the requirements for engineering, grade 12 and grade 11. There's physics and chem. Once again, no calculus. Okay, now some of your engineers going, that's crazy. Because I know you guys suffered, all you people that took calculus suffered through it. All right, but if you go to University of Waterloo, which is one of the better rated engineering schools in the country, and I'll select just civil engineering, you can see right there, there's required calculus. Okay, so I think you guys are kind of getting the point now of what I'm kind of leaning to. I'll do one more real quick. Another real popular one with a lot of our guys is kinesiology. Kinesiology at UBC has one of the lightest requirements in the country. Okay, this is all you need for kinesiology for UBC. Okay, really, because it says one of pre-calc and physiology, biochemistry, or physics. So there's an or in there. You don't need all of them. There's ors in there. But once again, if you look at something like University of Waterloo kinesiology, just to show you the difference, kinesiology at University of Waterloo, you need one of that and two of these. So once again, a little bit different, just a little bit different. So I always encourage, make sure you do your research on these things. Make sure you just spend the time to really look at it, okay? Sometimes you'll get situations like Smith Engineering at Queen's. And you'll get language like this. This one blows the guys' minds. They really they have a hard time with this. Where it says English Studies 12, Calculus, or Pre-Calc. That one's always a tough one. Most places across the country are Pre-Calc. You must have Pre-Calc, and Calc is the extra. At Queen's, they say Calc and Pre-Calc. It's set up that way because of the Ontario system. It confuses our BC students. So once again, the message to really take away from that is if you're ever unsure, is to have your son come talk to Mr. Achille and I. And we can help guide through that process and don't guess on it. That's the best solution really to kind of work through that situation, right? The other schools I have up here as well as I'm looking at is a school like Ivy. Now Ivy's a biz school. The other biz schools I showed you, they're actually calculus-based programs. The Ivy School at Western is a biz program that you actually don't enter until your third year. They'll use 5 subjects for entrance. You must have a math to apply to get into the program, but it can be any math. But when you get into the program in the third year, there is no math. They don't do calculus at all. So it's different from school to school to school to school to school. And that's where I say to everyone, use us as much as you can. You pay tuition, but I mean, realistically, we're free. Okay, we're free information. Have your son come ask us whenever they want. Okay, and we'll help and guide them through that information. Does anybody got any questions on this? I know that was really brief and really quick, but the whole point was really research, right? Research, research, research. Find out the admission requirements and then work backwards. Work backwards to the courses that are at VC here. So the next thing I always talk to a lot of the students about when we get into it is when your when your son finally gets old enough where they start looking and they're going to get into the grade 12 year and they're going to apply. Because once you do all those admission requirements and they're taking the courses in high school, from the academic side, there's not much else left to do, the academic side. Okay, there's not much else to do. You got to take care of those academics. Once you start getting into the spring of the grade 11 year, more in the summer, you can really start doing research about getting into dates and deadlines. So a lot of people don't know this, and nor should you, because a lot of us, I think I'm older than most of you, but a lot of us went to university a long time ago, and it's very, very different. But one of the things we encourage all the boys all the time is to get on there and Google and look for dates and deadlines. That takes a lot of stress away right as it is. I tell the boys, get the dates and deadlines, put it up on a wall in your room somewhere, and you'll know exactly what it is. A lot of parents think right away, your applications have to be done by September. It's actually not true at all. Okay, most of the applications that are really due in Canada are due right around, early ones are due around December 1st. Most applications aren't due until right around the time in Canada, January 15th. So you actually have a lot of time in your grade 12 year to actually get things done. Now, it's not a lot of time, but when you're sitting there in August and September and you're getting ready to apply, you actually have time to do those things. So I say to all the boys, and this is the same presentation I've given to a lot of the grade 12s already, just know your dates and deadlines. Know your dates and deadlines, where it's going to take you. Like I said, Queens, they all put them in, and it's a really easy thing to get on and go, okay, when are things going to be due? When are the applications actually due? And you just go through that process of dates and deadlines. Find out the admission requirements. Work backwards for course selection. You get close to grade 12, go through dates and deadlines. Okay? And then we get to talking to the students about where do you actually apply. Now, this one might be really interesting for a lot of you. Okay? In BC, we have a really easy application portal. Almost all the students are going to apply through an area called Education Planner BC. And it looks like this. Right now, a lot of our grade 12s are using this web page to make all their applications and do all their applications. Now, I would encourage you to get on Education Planner BC if your son is in grade 9, grade 10, or grade 11. There's actually tons of great information in here on programs where they can study, jobs that'll lead into from those programs, what they look like, descriptions, and everything else are all in here. The government offers it all for free. And then when your son at some point is ready to apply in their grade 12 year, obviously they'll have an account, but almost all the schools that they would want to apply to in BC are on this web page. Like I said, it's called Ed Planner BC. There's Simon Fraser right there. There's UBC. There's UVic, among other schools. Okay, some of the external applications are down there as well, but almost everything can be found up there. Okay, there's Langara. Everything can be found through Education Planner. Okay, it's all right there. If your son is going to apply to somewhere in Alberta, they also have a provincial portal. As well as Ontario, they have an Ontario Universities Application Center. For that one, you can apply to all the schools, all the universities in Ontario. You just go on that website. And I say to a lot of the students, and I have the odd student every year, it doesn't happen, actually, you know what, it hasn't happened a lot this year. It happened a lot the last couple of years, where they'd come up to me and they'd say, Mr. Taggart, can you please help me with my application? I don't know where to start. And I say, ooh, just wait right there. Have you started? No. Go on and start, because the applications are really not that difficult to fill out. You go into the applications, and where they tell you to put your name, you put your name, address, and so on and so forth. And for the programs, most of them are actually press and it's a pull down, and you just select the program. The thing that takes a long time in the university applications are the supplemental parts of the applications, the mini essays, the video interviews. Those take some time. I'll talk about those in a few minutes. But I always say to the students, once you get into your application, you're going to feel your stress levels go way down. Just get started, right? Now, that's for a lot of you, not for a few years. But maybe that's something you can plant in there. Hey, just get started. Just get started. Most of these applications don't open until October 1st of their grade 12 year. Lots of time. Lots of time, all right? Any of you who are U.S. people, who are thinking U.S. people, same thing. U.S. applications, most of them aren't due until November 1st of the grade 12 year. Okay, of the grade 12 year. Lots of time. Okay, lots of time. Like I said, Ontario has their own site. The reason I have Dalhousie and McGill up here is just in examples of schools that you actually have to apply straight to schools. So like I said, provincial portal, provincial portal, provincial portal, and then most of the other schools across the country are individual apply to those schools. Okay, apply to those schools. If your son happens to be a UK applicant, they'll apply to an area called UCAS. If they're US, they're most likely using an area called the Common App. Once again, don't remember this, just email me, see me in the hallway. Hey, Mr. Taggart, remember you spoke about this? Actually, you guys can call me Brian. But you see me, you can just stop me at any point and say, hey, what's that again? Or I remember you spoke about that, and I'll just let you know. All right? If you are interested in already getting into information sessions, there are fairs that come around. Did anybody go to the fairs this year that we advertised in the newsletter? Oh, a few of you, 2 of you. That's pretty good. That's all right. But we actually put in the newsletter all the time when the university fairs are. We probably get about 10 schools a year actually coming to present here to the students. It's not a lot. But there are university fairs that we put out there. The reason I put up this page is like everything else, everything is online now. Everything is online. The one school that never tours anymore and goes to schools is UBC. They do everything virtually, almost everything virtually. And I'll show you what I mean. Now, most of their informations are already kind of worked out right now, or worked through, but you can see right here that they offer UBC application workshops, okay? All different kinds of workshops for all the students that are there. And you guys are welcome to get onto these now too if you're really interested. But the best way if you want to find out about the schools is just go to their virtual sessions. Now, I have these schools just listed right here for the reason of just examples of virtual sessions going on, right? A lot of times with any of this kind of stuff, a lot of times we overthink this stuff a little bit, but it's really kind of all at our fingertips, where we can just get started and start collecting information, right? Okay, now mostly I had this up there for the grade 12s. There's a big conversation every single year that we have called early admissions. Here's the thing, not every university has early admissions. Not every university has early admissions. UBC does. And they have a hard date of December 1st. Other schools like University of Toronto have a November 7th early, but it's a recommended early. It's not a hard date. So if you actually apply November 15th, they still take your application. UBC, if you don't apply by December 1st, they won't look at anything or be interested again until that January 15th application. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, getting into the explanation of what people look at for early admissions, I think we're a little bit early for that still, about early admissions. But to give you an example, a lot of people start losing their minds a little bit about early admissions, about what universities are going to look at. But for example, UBC for early admissions, they don't even look at the boys' first term in grade 12. They won't use that for early admissions. They use completed 11 and completed 12, right? And they have it a lot of times in their definition, okay, of early admissions. Okay? Now, what happens if your son does not get in early? A lot of people worry about this as well. And I know I'm going really, really fast here, but I got to make sure we have time. I want to get you out of here by 8 o'clock. If your son does not get in early anywhere, the only reason someone is declined from a university early is if they do not have an admission requirement. They will not be declined for a program for a low grade early in the year, in grade 11, or at some point in grade 12, early part of grade 12, they won't be denied. And there's a few reasons for that. The student's grade may go up, and so they just bump them to the next session, to the next window of when they accept. So if they don't get in early, they bump them to the next window of when they accept. And if they don't get in that window, they bump them to the next window. So a lot of times, say UBC has an early admission. If you get in early, you start finding out around probably beginning of February, middle of February, you start finding out if you're early. Regular admissions, they start finding out sometime near the end of March, into April. If you don't get in that window, they make another offering in May, sometimes 2 offerings in May. And they keep going until all their seats are filled, right? Because they work like a business too. They want to get the money as well, right? So they just keep making those offers as it goes along. But nobody will get declined until later on in that part of the, like usually sometime in May is when some declines will start going out. Before then, they just start rolling over and they keep rolling over in those situations. But early admissions is really for those students at UBC, those 15 to maybe as high as 20% of the students. But as soon as I say, 15% of the students get in early, people start getting really stressed out. So I flip it and I say, just remember, 85% of the seats are still there. Oh, I feel better now. Right? It's all how you look at it. Oh, 85% of the seats are still there. Okay, I feel good. But they only give about 15% of the seats out for early admission. And those are really for the really high flyers, right? For the really high flyer guys. Okay, the advantages of early admission. What are the advantages of early admission anywhere? Okay, I think the biggest advantage of early admission is peace of mind. Takes away that little bit of that stress, takes away that anxiety. Focus a little bit more on your studies, all right? And at UBC, if you apply early, you're automatically assessed for entrance scholarships, which, by the way, though, are really hard to win. Really, really hard to win. Okay. But I say this to all the students as well, and I know this is way down the road, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time with this. You'll hear this a lot more later when your son's in grade 12. You never, ever apply early if your application is not up to par. And what I mean by up to par is there's usually a personal profile or a supplemental application that goes in with a lot of these applications. You never apply early unless it's bang on what you want. Because right now, the personal profile and the supplemental applications are becoming much more important. Okay, I'm going to skip through some of this. I'm going to go to the personal profile. This one is a big conversation topic. I'll give you an example of how important personal profiles are getting across the country. Queen's University. Has anyone ever heard of the Smith School of Business? Anybody? No? Okay. It's one of the most popular biz schools in Canada. Probably say the top ones where the kids really talk about are the Ivy School at Western, the Smith School at Queen's, Rotman's at Toronto, and Sauder School of Business. There's lots of other really biz schools, by the way, not mean to offend any biz schools, but those are the big ones they really talk about. The Smith School of Business is now doing this. Every student that applies to Smith School of Business at Queen's that has 88% or over, so 88 to 100% average, they then take them and put them in all one pool. They all then must do a supplemental interview and essay supplemental application. 100% of the acceptance is based on that. So you could be a 97% student, and the 88% student gets in before you based on supplemental application. Incredibly important. Okay. Here's the next thing I want to talk about with the personal profile and those supplemental applications. And please try to hear this. It's not about how many volunteer experiences they have. It's about how they can speak about it or how they can write about it. Now, obviously, you have to have enough experiences to be able to do that. So what do I mean by that? When your son has an experience, what have they learned? How have they grown? How have they changed? And how in any way will that benefit the university or school that they're going to? And that's kind of what they want to see. Actually, not even kind of, that is what they want to see. So that's why I put up here context, action, results. Right? Context, action, results. Son goes to volunteer at a camp for young people who've had cancer. Oh, I had a great experience. I met lots of people. Really felt for the kids there. I really learned that I have a blessing in my life. Before I went to the camp with kids with cancer, I did fundraising. What I ended up doing was fundraising 100 color books. When I got there, there was 150 kids. What I realized is even though I try to do in life, you can try to do something really nice, and you can still make people sad. What I learned is even if you try to do a good thing, sometimes it can turn out bad. They're looking for how much can the student dive into what they've known. They're trying to make the personal profile and those experiences, they're trying to make it so the young person that has to stay at home and look after their brother and sister and can't go on faith and action trips has just as an equal opportunity as that person that goes on faith and action trips. They're trying to make an equal playing field. So in these personal profiles, what I tell a lot of the boys is, as you're having these experiences, start creating a Google Doc. Start recording your thoughts, your ideas. What did you learn? How did you grow? How did you change? To make a really effective thing. I always say to the boys, if I can read your personal profile and I can't tell you wrote it, you don't come through in your writing, it's not a good personal profile. So you got to really work, and that takes time. That kind of writing takes time, especially with some of the personal profiles where you have 250 words or 500 words to say it. You really have to work on that writing, okay? So that's why those personal profiles become very, very important. And that's why you can see up here, there's a video that goes along with it. I don't think I have that kind of time tonight. But you could see that there's videos that go along. How did I find this page right here, UBC personal profile? I Googled it, UBC personal profile. And I got this page with that video. And not only did I find that, I actually found the rubric and example questions that they ask on the personal profile, which are very similar to the questions they ask across the country. So once again, you just do your research, right? Do your research or come talk to us. But I can't emphasize this enough. It's not the amount of volunteer activities that your son does, okay? It's about what they've learned, how they changed, and how they've grown, okay, and those kinds of things. That's really, and like I said, I encourage you to do your own research on that as well. Okay? Once again, you could do your research as well on tips for creating a Bachelor of Commerce application video interview. So on UBC has a blog, the UBC blog. You can find all kinds of information on that blog, right? And it's not just helpful for UBC, it'll actually help you out for any of the universities that you're looking for, right? So once again, like I say to students, well, how do I prepare for a video interview? Well, let's start researching. Let's start looking for ideas. Let's look for posts online, recommendations, right? And I also say to a lot of students, make sure you practice as well, right? Make sure you practice actually doing a video thing. Get online and do a time. Have someone ask you a question and time it. You practice, 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 practice. But there's examples online as well. Okay, it's all there at the fingertips. Okay? Like I said, and for most of the entrants for universities, they're going to have a mix of this: personal profile, academic profile, and then that's where they'll make an admissions and decision. This is more with UBC, but a lot of them function the exact same way. Okay, that was an early application for Toronto, but I want to make sure I keep going through this. The other thing I wanted to talk to all of you about today is actually about transcripts. One of the things that we get asked the most about every single year are transcripts, because they can actually be very confusing. A lot of people think they actually need their transcripts for actually applying to university on the spot. Now, most of you don't have to worry about this because your son's not in grade 12. What I really wanted to get to you is actually show you that there are actually two different kinds of transcripts. Most people probably have no idea that. One of the transcripts is the ministry transcript. The ministry transcript is the official transcript that lives at the Ministry of Education. It does not live at Vancouver College. Mr. Achille and I periodically send marks to the ministry, and they end up here. Now, if you notice something about the ministry transcript, grades 10, grades 11, and grade 12, there's no grade 9 grades on there, because the graduation program in British Columbia is 10, 11, 12. Doesn't include grade 9. Next to it is the Vancouver College transcript. This is the transcript we keep in-house. Okay? This is the transcript that the students are going to need to have sent to the universities when they finalize their decisions where they want to go. Who sends this transcript? Your son, not the school. But Mr. Achille and I teach them how to do it. We teach them how to do it. But this is the transcript that gets sent. The school never sends it. Your son sends it. But like I said, we're going to show them how to do it. We sit down with all the grade 12s. And over the grade 12 year, we must talk about it, I don't know, way more than a dozen times to make sure no one gets missed. Because even though we sit in the classroom and do it with them, it's amazing how many of them don't do it. It's incredible. I don't know what they're doing while we're doing it with them, but they're not doing it. I know that's not a surprise. The next one over here, like I said, is the Vancouver College transcript. This is kept in-house. This does get used for some universities, but it's never used as the final transcript for universities. We don't send this to the universities. We sometimes give this to students that they upload in their student portal when they're applying to universities. Once again, you don't have to remember that. What you have to remember is this. Your son comes to you and has questions about transcripts. This is the best answer you can give them. Go see Achille or Taggart. Oh, I'm serious though, actually. That's the best thing you can do is don't even try to figure it out yourself at that point. Go see Achille and Taggart. But you need to remember is there's two different transcripts. On this one, we have grade 9, 10, 11, and 12. And you can see I'm actually using my son's transcript, but he's only in grade 7. So that's why he has nothing in 9, 10, 11, and 12. You probably can guess why we have 9, 10, 11, and 12 on the VC transcript for U.S. schools, because U.S. schools care about grade 9. Now, we're going to have a little problem with that in the future because there's no grade 9 grades anymore, but we'll cross that when we start having more problems with that. That one's out of our control, my control anyways, right? So grade 9, grade 10, grade 11, that's the VC transcript. We do use that for some Ontario schools, but for like term where they have to upload it to the University of Toronto portals and whatnot. But once again, don't try to remember that. Your son needs a transcript at some point. You go say, hey, go see Taggart and Achille. They'll let you know which ones you need. And that's really the best course of action to do with that situation. But I think it's very important for you to know there are 2 different transcripts, okay? If you want to see it, this one right here is mostly used for schools outside of BC, mid-year grades, used for U.S. applications, NC2A eligibility, NC2A youth sports coaches. You do not need to submit it with Canadian applications, and UBC does not want that transcript ever. They do not want it. This one, most BC and Ontario schools use this. You give permission to universities to access it. That's where we teach your son. All schools receive this at the end of July after their grade 12 year. This is the one that says, yes, they've graduated. Schools don't receive that. There's no proof of graduation, but they receive it because the boys send it. Okay, this is the official transcript. It does not need to be submitted at the time of application. Once again, we'll go over that when your boys are in grade 12. Self-reported grades, we don't need that. The other big question we get a lot is letters of recommendation. You do not need a letter of recommendation to apply to a school in Canada. Don't need it. They don't want it. They don't have the staff to read it. After all the personal profiles and the essays, they don't have the staff. What your son will need most of the point when they apply to schools in Canada is they may need an email like verifier, like they'll put Mr. Chili's email or mine, or they might call and say, did this student really graduate, or did this student do this? Even then, we don't really get called. They just don't have the staff to deal with it, right? What do you need a letter of recommendation really for? Some scholarships in Canada. And by the way, scholarships are a whole other conversation. Please don't believe the media that there's all the scholarships out there that everyone can get one. It's simply not true. Okay, it's simply not true. And if you have questions about whether you should use outside agencies for scholarships, you're welcome to come ask my opinion about that first, okay? But scholarships are not that simple to get. The ones where everybody can apply to are very difficult to win. Okay, the ones that have little things like somebody's part of a union, or someone's part of a certain social club, or a cultural club, or there's a scholarship for sometimes for students who have IEPs or some kinds of learning situation. But the ones that are open to the general public are very, 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 I could say another very, competitive. Because everyone can apply to it. Just think of population, right? They're very tough to win. But anyways, we're not talking about scholarships necessarily right now. But sometimes you need a letter of recommendation for a scholarship, and that's totally understandable. U.S. applications and UK applications, you definitely need letters of recommendation. I just got done most of the early admission ones or early decision ones for U.S. just past November 1st. I think I did about 10 of those for that date. I finished that. I think I have another 4 or 5 coming up for November 15th, and I have another bunch coming up for January. For Ontario, or for Canada, like I said, you don't need letters of recommendation. Once again, you don't have to remember that. But before you say to your son, hey, you need a letter of recommendation, and you think you might need it, say you forget it a year from now or 2 years from now, same thing, best message, go see Taggart or Chili. They'll let you know what you need and what you don't need. And we'll help them out through that process, okay? And you know what? I think that's probably, I'm going to end it right there for what I think you all need tonight. I hope that part that I did today was helpful. I hope that was a good starting point for a lot of you for university applications. And I guess, do I have a few minutes I can open up for questions?
We can do a few questions, yeah.
Does anybody have any questions right off the hop? Yep. No, it's a good question. So if you didn't hear the question was around, like, you heard that UBC actually offers later than other universities. So if you've been offered by some schools, how do you navigate that situation if UBC offers you later? True? To be honest, I don't think UBC does offer very late. I think they're actually one of the schools that are perfectly on time. What happens sometimes is some students get offered in the later windows, so into May, sometimes even into June, and then that's where the reputation of that happening spreads through the community. Most of the offers for UBC are actually made for early, like I said, in February, and most of the regular offers are actually made late March and April. Most of the deadlines to decide where you want to go to school across Canada is May 1st. So what happens again in May, like I said, is most deadlines in Ontario and BC, you got to decide where you want to go if you've had a previous offer by May 1st. Where it gets tough is then because a student might get offered by 4 schools. So May 1st, they accept 1, right? And then all of a sudden, a whole bunch more offers go back out in May. And that's where it gets tough because student might go, well, you know, I didn't get offered by UBC, but I've been offered by Toronto and Simon Fraser. Oh my gosh, what do I do to decide? And then they might still get an offer later on in May. So what we do with that is we take that for a case-by-case basis. So what I would advise you to do is if your son has a situation where they're waiting for an offer from, say, somewhere like UBC, and they've had offers in other places, to come talk to us. And then we can kind of help them weigh out those pros and cons of, hey, what's the best decision here and there. Now, realistically, if they accept, say, something like SFU, and they've been offered by SFU, at that point, maybe by June 1st, they might have to pay a deposit to SFU. But before that, you really don't have to pay the deposit. But there's no harm in accepting SFU. You get an offer later on in May from UBC. Go ahead and accept that offer. And then you can just turn down your SFU offer. Something in those situations. Some of the tough issues, though, is in Ontario. In Ontario, you can only have 1 acceptance at a time. In BC, you can have as many acceptances as you want, as long as you're willing to lose your deposit. You can actually have an acceptance in BC, Alberta. In every province of the country, you can have an acceptance. It's as long as you're willing to pay a deposit and lose your deposit, you can actually wait until you finally decide. But yeah, UBC doesn't necessarily offer late. I think that just kind of lives a little bit with the students that might get offered later after the first few rounds. Yeah. Any other questions? Yep. Very. Are we talking UBC? Okay. Okay. Well, see, that's the hard part because depending on the school, some schools, okay, so this is my opinion from my experience, some programs are very snobbish. Like at UBC, you can't list solder second. You won't get in. Honestly, you won't. If you list science second at UBC, you won't get in. So, well, I was going to apply to solder and use science as my backup. Nah, you won't get in. And that's where it gets a little bit tough. So that's where I say, like, it depends on the school and it depends on the program. Someone like Rotman's at Toronto, you don't want to pick them second. If you know they're a very competitive program, that is the hard part because they're very, very competitive. So some of the students that say apply to sciences at UBC, I'll recommend to them that if they apply for sciences, they make a second choice, the life science, or the, what's the program? The land forms, or the land and, thank you, land and food system science program. Like, yeah. So what I would suggest at that point, depending on depending what your son wants to apply to, I would say at that point, have them come speak to us, and then we can give them some recommendations at the time, depending on that specific school. Because it does matter in some of the schools. It's a very good question. Yeah, some people say, well, I'll just list solder and sciences as my first or whatever choice, and I'll put them. It's UBC very much cares. Yeah, they won't advertise that, but we know they do. Yes, they do care. 100%. Yes? Like, do they know, like, I'm not sure. Oh, no, they wouldn't. No. No, in Ontario, they do have the portal would know, but the schools wouldn't know. No, they would have no idea. No. Like I said, you could have an acceptance in every single province, and the other schools would never know you accepted those schools. No. I know, we got to. I'm getting yanked off.
We're giving Mr. Taggart the hook. So, thank you, Brian. Thank you very much. Just in the interest of time, so as I said before, what's going to happen now, there could be another couple of questions, but Mr. Taggart is going to help, right, Brian? You're going to help Sean transition. At this point, if there's another question or two, I could try my hand at answering them while these guys get set up. Otherwise, let me just remind you the main thing. Potentially, there's a lot of questions. Please feel free at any time to send an email either to Mr. Taggart, B. Taggart at Vancouver College, or me, G. Achille at Vancouver College. The only thing we'd ask is that you send the email to one of us, because we get lots of email already. If we both get the same email, it's like the center fielder and the right fielder going for the same fly ball. I got it, you take it, and it gets missed. So pick one of us and send that email. Feel free to do that. Or as he said, have your son come and see us. Now at this point, we're going to transition. Mr. Sean Martinez, graduate of what year? Sorry, Sean. How much? 1995. He will be doing a presentation. I'm going to let him intro that. It's on visual arts, fine arts, architecture, design programs at post-secondary. So we'll just give people a few minutes to reshuffle. If you want to stay for this, it's about approximately 15 to 20 minutes. If you'd like to maybe... Okay, Mr. Taggart will be out in the hall there for any questions that you may still have. We'll let Sean get started here. Let people settle in. And he'll be speaking to you from his own experience and working with his and helping his son successfully navigate and ultimately get admitted to one of the top design programs at the university level. So this is Sean Martinez. Here he is.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Okay, so as Mr. Achille said, this is about portfolio admissions programs, so admissions that require, in addition to, so you kind of take what Mr. Taggart said, remember that, and then you got to add this on top of it if your son is interested in something like architecture, industrial design, fine arts, dance, something that is to do with essentially showing the university what kind of work they've done in the past. And so it's more than just writing an essay, it's more like submitting like paintings and photographs and things like that. Okay, so here's a few examples of what the portfolio programs are. So with regards to architecture, industrial design, fine arts, what schools are under here. Also my son Spencer did apply to a number of these, and so I'll show you that. So my son Spencer graduated last year, and he kind of, in grade 10, he decided that, he was thinking, we started kind of looking at universities and things like that, actually traveled to Ontario, went to a few. After grade 11, he decided because he was going to go into, when he started grade 11, he decided, okay, go do architecture. We put him into, he was taking art here at VC, but we supplemented that with some arts umbrella classes in Granville Island. And then between his grade 11 and grade 12 year, he took the UBC design, the design discovery class, which was over the summer. And that was a huge help with regards to actually showing him what he needed to do with regards to applying for architecture to UBC. So UBC Sala, the School of Architecture and Landscape Architecture at UBC, is one of those schools that actually they state they will not accept you if you choose them second. You must choose them first. Okay, you're allowed to have a second choice, but they can't be second, otherwise, because they only accept 50 students in any given year. Okay, so here's my key points, and I'm going to go through them pretty quickly, and I'll just allow for questions later on. I went too long last time, and the people got it really late. Okay, so first point, start yesterday. So this means that, as Mr. Taggart said, the admissions kind of all opens in October, but you're now going to have to remember two deadlines. There's going to be the main deadline for applying on the on Ontario's website or on the BC website, and then they're going to have a deadline or when you actually have to submit the portfolio materials. So you're going to have to remember 2 of those going through. Now, so you have to start as early as possible. What that means is as well, because you need to give yourselves and your son enough time to actually produce the works that he has to do. So UBC, for example, has 3 questions, and you actually build unique things for those things. Now, another meaning of why I say start yesterday is Spencer actually went through and we took everything he did from grade 10 onwards, and we compiled it and scanned it. And he ended up using some of it. So the chess piece and the flowers on the right, bottom right, are from his grade 10 art class. And he ended up submitting this piece of art on the upper middle there. Oh, I can do this. In the upper middle here. And that was inspired by the artwork from grade 10. And he actually showed the evolution of the work, which was something that his mentor advised, and I'll talk about that in a bit. Okay. So, as Mr. Taggart said, this is just to reinforce that, know your programs. So you need to go through each program. Is actually, some of them are very different from each other. UBC asks for 3 things, and they want you to actually build 3 things for them, photograph it, and submit the photographs. Carleton wanted a portfolio of stuff that he'd already done. Not Carleton, another one, Toronto Metropolitan, wanted a portfolio plus something that they were going to do just for them. So you have to know every single program. And you have to stay organized around all of that. So what we actually did was, in order to keep Spencer able to kind of keep producing the work, I was actually helping him just keep everything organized, scanning, doing all the kind of administrative work in the background, just to keep him free to kind of do the creative stuff. Okay. Okay. Find a mentor. So this is where you're going to have to go through and network and find out. So when you talk about listening to your son and things like that, you kind of have to start to find out like who in your network actually may be doing this job already. So we're very fortunate. My sister's an architect. My brother-in-law is an architect. I work in the city of Vancouver. I deal with a lot of architects. So we could find an architect who could actually advise Spencer. So, excuse me. So it's very important that you can find somebody who can advise them, because unless you're actually in this line of work, which is great, but it also helps when you have a third party, because I still have stuff that Spencer did in grade 2, and I think it's like brilliant, right? And you're not quite the most objective person to be able to advise them. So it's great to have a third party who could actually tell them, submit this, take this and expand it, things like that, right? So that's very good to have. Okay, stay organized. So this is very key. It depends on, we applied to too many schools, and Spencer will tell you that too. 7 schools, he got admitted to 6, and was waitlisted in 1. So, but we had to keep track of every single one. What did we submit to who? And then there were versions of each one, because, for example, one school did not want his name on any of the actual images. So, most artists, they do a painting, they'll sign it. So we actually had to remove his name from the scan of the image because they didn't want his name on it. So you have to keep tabs on details like that. And that's where, as parents, you can kind of help think that, because you kind of go in parallel and you read the applications with them and make sure that they're keeping everything, straight in that. So what I've got here is just like the folders. Oh, sorry. The folder structure that we had, that we kept. Essentially, we had a folder for every single piece of work that he did. We recorded dates, like when he finished it, what materials he used, because these are all asked for, right? What materials he used, the title. So you have to kind of come up with. Sometimes you don't get allowed a description, because you can write, like, he can kind of write a description that's like, oh, what inspired this, how I came about this, blah blah blah. But if you can't, then you have to have a very good title, because sometimes all you're allowed to write is a title and a date of completion. The image on the right is a rig we had to come up with, because we had to photograph some of his work were so large that we couldn't scan. If you can't physically scan it into a scanner, and they were made of like chalk, and it would actually leave chalk marks inside the scanners. So this was a table with a felt sheet on top and a ladder, and you'd actually go up onto the ladder and photograph it outdoors in natural light, and take your regular cell phone and take it from above on a flat plane so that it actually comes out like a scan. Anyway, so these are things that we had to come up with in order to get the stuff in. So record your process. So it's one thing to produce the actual products, the actual artwork to submit to the schools, but they don't want just that. They want to know why you did it. What was your process? How did you come up with the materials? What was your inspiration? How did you get from your inspiration to the actual final product? So I'll show you the final product later, but this is what Spencer submitted with regards to the second question for the UBC application, where it said they had to build a home for a pet. And he picked a turtle, and his inspiration was Cinque Terre and the Italian Riviera. So he had to come up with that, and I'll show you in the next one what he actually did. So he had to explain all this. And he didn't have to do it as he came up with this. Like he didn't have to explain it as a paragraph. He actually did this flow chart, which he thought was, and I think he picked that up from the UBC Design Discovery class. And so this on the bottom right is actually what he produced. So you kind of get from that to that, and you have to explain that. Now, number 6 here is pick up the trash. It means that don't throw anything away for a period while they're doing their application. Because one of the things that was required for one of the submissions was it has to be made of recycled materials. And you can't really make that up. So, we were keeping things like, egg cartons, old styrofoam. These are like covers of pill boxes and things like that. This was a plastic gear from an old toy. Pipe cleaners, pool noodles, and things like that he was using, cutting up, and putting together. So, but you never know which thing is going to kind of inspire the next thing. So we had a pile of junk in the corner of our basement where you could just kind of go in, look at it, and anything we found that was interesting, we washed old containers and we threw into the pile. Eventually we threw it away after he was accepted, but yeah. Okay, and finally, take breaks. That's why if you go back to point number 1, start early, because there's going to be days where your son's just going to be super tired, and he knows he's just trying to come up with an idea and nothing's coming out. And you just got to let them rest. Maybe go back, do some admin stuff. And because on top of all the creative work they have to do here, they still have to write their essays, right? And so it's really a lot of stuff to go on. So we did what Mr. Taggart suggested, actually put the question, we copied and pasted from the applications into a Google Doc, right? And I was the one doing that. And then, we were working through it. It was all his words. We would write it. He'd write it out. I'd go in, edit it. But we would just cycle through the schools, right? We'd do UBC one day, UBC one day, University of Toronto another day, Carleton, right? And we'd know, when the deadlines were, right? So we would just cycle through it each time. So he wasn't working on the same one over and over again, right? But what you find is that there are certain themes that works for one school, and you can kind of massage it just enough to fit the next school's questions and things like that. So here's the last slide. There's my contact email if you have any further questions. I'll take some questions tonight. The QR code is, if you want to, I could set up another session and do it over Zoom or Teams and something like that for those who want to do more detail, but there's a form that's attached to that QR code that you can fill in, and then I'll get in touch and see if we can schedule another time. But that's kind of what it is, and I'll open up to questions now. Was that clear? No questions? Okay, thank you. Yes. Oh, go ahead. So he did go to UBC Sala. He was accepted, and he was accepted in April. University of Toronto accepted him in February. So there was that period where we were so it wasn't late. UBC didn't accept it, but it was later than Toronto was early. So Toronto was really early, and Toronto was his second choice. He didn't really want to go to Toronto, but it was kind of, with regards to architecture, UBC and Toronto kind of just trade 1 and 2 all the time. So we were very fortunate. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. It's actually, so for UBC, it's on, so for each one, they actually list it. So if you go into each school's portal for their admissions, so remember, there's the admissions for the school, and then for the architecture program, there's another page. So usually you have to go and find that. Typically, you have to have English, you have to have some math, social studies, geography is helpful. Geography, or there's an urban studies 12 class that is useful for that as well. Yeah. UBC says 65% on the website, but I wouldn't believe that. Oh, the reality? No, we don't actually know. Like, they don't actually tell us. The official one's 65%, but what did he graduate as? 92, I think? Yeah. Go ahead, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes, actually, they go through, so you build 3 things in that program over the summer. It's like over 1 week. And those 3 things are very similar to what the UBC application is. They're not exact. So Spencer actually ended up building another 3 things, but he said that what he learned from building the first 3 things over the summer was a big help. And actually, we photographed what he built in the summer to show that it was part of the inspiration for what he did for the final entry to UBC. I think someone here was, yeah, go ahead. So we used Canva, which is free, to actually just put the kind of like slides together, and then output them into PDFs. Then we uploaded them. So Canva was very useful because I could log in, I could set it up. So I was organizing all his work, and I could put it in for him, and then he would go in and he would edit, move things around, put the words in, and everything like that. But he could be working on, say, Carlton's application in Canva, and I could be setting up UBC's, right? And we're all logged into, I'm sharing a file with him, just like in Google Docs. So that's what's useful with Canva. So we use Canva and Google Docs to do stuff. Yeah. Yes, so he was applying into undergraduate programs. So what he's actually working on right now at UBC is a Bachelor of Design. So it's called a Bachelor of Design in Architecture, Landscape, and Urban Design, or something like that. So he doesn't graduate and become an architect right away. He has to still take the master's. But even with Spencer, he said, like, he was really interested in design discipline, and then he will decide after he finishes his undergrad whether he will take the master's and to become a full architect, because the second choice actually in disciplines was industrial design. So apparently a lot of industrial design eventually become architects, or vice versa. But he felt that industrial design was too narrow. The architecture training was actually more broad. So that's why he wanted to do architecture if he could. But if he couldn't get into a program, then we were also applying to a lot of industrial design programs as well. Yes? Which one? The design discovery he did between the summer between grade 11 and 12. Yeah. Anyone else? Questions? So, yeah. No, he was he started. So the questions for Sala, I believe, were released in October. It's like something like the regular application to go into UBC was October 1st. And then October 15th was when, so you had to apply to UBC first. And then because you were in, then they sent you the questions by October 15th for the actual portfolio work that you had to do. And then you had a deadline to complete all the essays and stuff for the regular UBC application by, say, December-ish. But then January 31st was the deadline for the portfolio submissions. So there was a lot of different dates throughout it, right? So you kind of get a little more time, but essentially his entire Christmas break was just building stuff, gluing stuff together, drawing stuff out. Like that was our entire like fall, essentially. Yeah, go ahead. I think be ready for some late nights. If you're applying to this type of program, my wife will still tell you now, like she was like, she was up shaving down pieces of wood for his for something he was building. I think it was a lamp for UBC, right? And what the most difficult part was making sure that we were helping him kind of get things done, but the designs and the output were all his. It's a very fine line. Like, for example, he'd write his essays out into the Google Docs. I would go in and I would edit it, but I would use the suggest feature in Google Docs, which actually marks out my changes. So it actually is like a red line. So he can see my changes and he can like accept or decline them. And usually we end up talking about it first, because I'll be like, your sentence here isn't clear. What are you actually trying to say? And he'll explain it and be like, okay, then see what I suggested, or maybe we can talk about something else. So there's a lot of those, which was actually really nice to be able to talk to your son and like, okay, do this and do that. With regards to the creative side, it was really about just being the grunt work, like literally, like like my wife was doing, shaving stuff down and talking about like measuring stuff out and cutting it and things like that. But because the design had to be his, right? At the end of the day, he has to defend it and he has to describe it, and so that was a worry for me, that like, am I putting any of myself into this? I don't want to do that. I just want to make sure that I'm just helping him get it done and making sure that it's still true to being his work. Any other questions? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes. So for architecture, we found that it's actually very thin in BC. If you want to do architecture, there was only UBC. If you wanted to do industrial design, there was Emily Carr, right? For architecture, there was UBC, University of Toronto. BCIT offers a 2-year program where you can you get a diploma, so you can actually work in architecture as a draftsperson. And then you could go back and do an actual bachelor's after that, after 2 years. So that was an interesting program as well. But BC, for architecture, there was only UBC Sala, honestly, that we could find. And BCIT, if you wanted to do the 2-year, and then another 2 years after that. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
If there is a contact information for Sean, and Sean, I'm going to pitch to see if you're interested to do a separate session later on. As you know me, I do want to run things on time, so I do want to thank everybody for being here. I hope you found it useful. I can hear Mr. Taggart still outside, so if you want to talk to him, but we're done. I just want to be respectful of everybody's time. I hope you found it useful. Thank you very much. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Theo, in the background for running this. This session will be available. I will send it out, so if you missed things, it will be available. It's recorded. So thank you. Have a good night.